Is Dubai the fragrance capital? Now, there was a few things that sparked this conversation because I was reading an article. I think it was on iNews Fragrance, iFragrance News. I think it was up there, and they had asked the question, and it made me really start to think: is Dubai the fragrance capital of the world? Now, when we look at this, we have to look at it from somewhat of a historical take, because I would like to think that before, let's just say 2000, let's just say 2020. Before 2020, perfume was basically like a French, Paris, like a Europe thing. Like, not saying that it originated over there, but they were really known for like their craftsmanship, their artistry, really, when it comes to perfume, because of just the elegance of how they do things. Then there was a time to where, when 2020 around COVID time is when I first remember picking it up. Was when I first heard about a Latapa fragrance. And the first Latapa fragrance I ever heard of or about was Oud for Glory. Shout out to my guy Jeremy over at House of Colossus. That was my first time being introduced to Middle Eastern fragrances, or even just affordable fragrances like what we've been getting or what we've been talking about lately. One of the things that I want to ask about when we first started this conversation is this: are we looking? I want to take two standpoints. I want to talk about it from a general consumer standpoint, and then I want to talk about it from a fragrance enthusiast. If you ask a general consumer, somebody who just normally gets their fragrances from a Macy's, Dillard's, a mall, a storefront, basically. They go to the store to get theirs. They're not gonna have as much insight and knowledge. They're not gonna know exactly what or who would be listed as the top fragrance, or why Dubai is even making, the Middle East is making the rain that it is. Whereas with us enthusiasts, we can tell you about everything we can tell you about the Latapas, we can tell you about stuff that you can find at the mall, we can tell you about the underground stuff, Facebook Marketplace. Like, we can tell you so much that goes into it. And one of the first things that I think that really sparked this conversation was when we first got introduced to Oud. Now, I can't really tell you my first experience with Oud, because I want to say it might have been Oud for Glory, but just on a general market standpoint, the first time, and I did a little research, the first time we got introduced to Oud on like a mass scale was M7. That was one of the first ones, and that was the one that really interested. And from there, that's when we got introduced to incense in our fragrances. That's when we got introduced to oud in our fragrances. That's when we got introduced to notes like saffron in our fragrances. And it made those somewhat more earthy fragrances a little bit more popular. And I think that at one point it was a lot more like fresh shower gel, easy to wear fragrances when we first got, like, let's just say pre-2020. It was always fresh, clean, inoffensive, like a straight line and narrow type of fragrance. Then you have the Middle Eastern fragrance companies, or the Oriental, I don't know how we gonna list that, but we have the fragrance companies from the Middle East. They come in and they introduce us to spices, they introduce us to oud, they introduce us to a much more, I don't even want to say unique, but maybe daring or maybe challenging way to wear a fragrance, to style a fragrance, maybe notes that we might not know about. Let me know if I'm tripping. Please let me know if y'all think that I'm wrong when it comes to us being introduced heavily to ouds, leathers, spices, things like that. Those more earthy notes when we got introduced to the Middle Eastern side of fragrances. The second thing, and this is where one of the biggest controversies with this whole thing is this. And this is where I think that the bigger brands they're gonna have a hard time with this, is that you can make a fragrance and it can be cloned within a month. And sometimes the inspirations and clones that we get from the original fragrances are better. They are definitely better. You gotta look at it like this, because the fragrances that come out of the Middle East, not only sometimes are they better, but you get a lot more bang for your buck, and you get a better cost value for what you're paying. Some of the presentations that we get with these affordable companies blow designer fragrances out of the water. It's not even a competition, fam. And then you also have to look at it from, if we're going to stay on the price standpoint of things, you have to look at it like this. A lot of these Middle Eastern and affordable fragrances that we do buy, you can pick them up for $40. B.O.B. safe style fragrances, you know what I mean? Where you're not breaking the bank, and sometimes you get a lot more than what you would get with the designers or fragrance that you can pick up at a mall. You get a much better presentation. Sometimes the scent profile is better because they might have made certain tweaks and twists. They might listen to the people and say, hey, you know what? We see that y'all like X, Y, and Z, but y'all didn't like this one note, or y'all didn't like the transition. Boom, we're gonna change this. We're gonna make it a little bit more floral, make it a little bit more gourmandish, whatever it might take. That'll take away the one thing that y'all dislike about a fragrance. I think that the budget is one thing that is gonna have to make designers either step their game up, because you can't continue to do, and this is one thing, I really haven't seen this with any of the Middle Eastern fragrances, but one thing I'm noticing, and it's been going on for a while with the designers, is where I'm cool with getting the EDT, the EDP, the Parfum, I get that. When we start going into these elixirs and these EDP intenses and these all these, I can't even pronounce all this shit sometimes, but it's like we're not getting much of a difference with the designers when they drop a new fragrance compared to with some of these affordable joints, bruh, they knocking it out of the water. We're getting new fragrances, we're getting new scent profiles, we're getting every new packaging. Like, it's kind of hard to knock what you get in a affordable Middle Eastern fragrance compared to what you get in designers. And then even if we just take the presentation, how it looks, even when we take the fragrance itself, they're not separating themselves too much. Now, there are some asterisks, because there are some designer fragrances that really do shine and stand out no matter what you try to clone. You're not going to be able to touch them. Dior Sauvage does a real good job of that. Chanel, Paco Rabanne does a real good job of that. Bleu de Chanel does a real good job of that, to where you can clone a fragrance, you can clone one of their inspirations, but it's not going to be comparable. Where sometimes fragrances like a John Barbados, Moschino, like those, they're a little bit more. For some reason, I noticed that the clone companies are able to get those a lot closer, whereas it's kind of hard to get that in Broxton that's in a Dior Sauvage to like match in an affordable Middle Eastern. So yeah, quality could possibly be where they could make up, some of these designer brands could make up ground. But let me ask you this: if you're looking at a $40 clone fragrance, and then you're looking at a $120 designer fragrance of the exact same DNA, which one are you more likely to go with? I personally would like to think the more people would go towards the $40 a clone affordable, especially if they just smell them side by side, no price tag, just smell it, boom boom. Which one you like? Oh no, man. Oh no. I'm kind of curious. I am curious to see how they manage to keep their fragrances so cheap. I am too, fam. And it's one of those things where we're not gonna know it now because we're still somewhat in the early phases of like this whole Middle Eastern fragrance takeover that we have right now. I don't think that it's gonna be until it's like later on down the line, and hopefully, God forbid, it's not because of like any type of health implications or anything like that, but because we really don't know what's in these fragrances at all. But I don't think that that's something that we'll know until later on down the line. I don't think that we can know that right now in our current state because it's still in the early phases of it. I don't even think that with our introduction to these Middle Eastern companies, like the way we've been getting, I don't even think it's 5 years old yet. I don't even think it's 3 years. So we're still in the early phases of that, to where we might have a little while to go before we actually see any true implications of how this could be affecting us. Now, the other thing, and this is one of the, outside of price, this is the one last thing that I think would knock the Middle Eastern fragrances when it comes to, are they the fragrance capital? The one thing that I dislike, but I can't, it's not really something that I can really gripe about because it's business, so I understand business. I just don't like it as a consumer. But one thing that I do say that's the biggest difference when it comes to designers versus Middle Eastern fragrances is that designer fragrances, as soon as you get it out the box, they're good to go. You don't have to wait for a designer fragrance to macerate or anything. You can spray that one and go, and it's because when they, most of the time, when designers, when they make fragrances, it's planned. They already know what's coming out. They might know what fragrance they're gonna drop a whole year ahead of time. So when they get to making the formula, and then they get the packaging and the presentation and all that stuff, they might have all that done within 4 or 5 months of production, the whole line. Then after that, they normally let them sit there for a while to let that process of, I forgot what it's called exactly, but it's almost like just a longer maceration process before it hits the consumer. Whereas with some of the Middle Eastern fragrances that we get, as soon as it come out the line, it's like the Little Caesars, man. They shit hot and ready. You know, like as soon as it comes out the line, they putting it out there. There's no maceration process. We have to wait for the process to macerate. And that's where I think that at times it throws us off with our fragrance experience when it comes to Middle Eastern fragrances, because you might be, let me ask you this. How many times have y'all bought an affordable fragrance, a BOB safe fragrance, sprayed it initially, didn't think much of it, go back and visit it 4 to 6 months later, and your mind is blown? You didn't know, like, at first when you tried it, it was extremely harsh. Now 6 months later, it's smooth. You can pick up more of the notes. You can pick up more of the profile. I know I'm not the only one that's happened to. And I think that's one of the main things, or the main differences when it comes from designers to the Middle Eastern affordable companies, is that you don't have to wait for them. Designers, you can spray and go right out the bat. Whereas with some of the Middle Easterns, if you spray it, if it's harsh, you might have to let that thing sit there for like 4 to 6 months. It's not going to be something where you can actually just wear right out the gate. I think everything has its place. Designers are not going anywhere because if people only shop in stores. True. I don't think the designer's going anywhere. But I do think that it's going to get to a point where if they don't fix something marketing-wise, they don't try to do something like on the creative side, that they're going to lose a lot more business than they think to some of the Middle Eastern clone companies. Like, bruh, it's already, put it like this, Chanel is already striking people's channels for copyright for using clone fragrances and saying that this is comparable to this. So that's why you're seeing a lot of fragrance content creators that are making the switch from mentioning anything that deals with the clones or deals with the originals, and that mostly just speaks to the clones. So yeah, it's definitely a shift changing right now for sure. Asanish and Indy, I think some of them priced themselves out of the market and they asked for a premium without being established. Hold that thought, William. We're gonna talk about that. We're gonna talk about that for sure. I got a little bit more time. Well, I don't know, I think I got some more time. I really want to talk about this niche versus indie. Chanel gotta chill. Hey, I agree, fam. I know they don't. I think they were the ones that went after Neve, and then I also saw another fragrance creator got hit on his. I forgot what clone he was talking about, but I know it was Chanel though. He said so.